Hello, everybody. Dear colleagues, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the third and final block online of online Subsidiary 24 plenaries. We have much work ahead of us today, tomorrow, and Wednesday, when we want to approve 7 CRP documents and do the first reading of Agenda Item 9 on biodiversity and health, as well as the suspension for the virtual session of Substa, all in less than 9 hours. I hope we can continue in the spirit of cooperation as we have done until now. We have an ambitious agenda for today. We will consider CRP 6 on IPBES, which contains no brackets, CRP 5 on biodiversity and agriculture, which similarly contains no brackets, and CRP 8 on synthetic biologies, which has a number of brackets. I intend to cover recommendations in these CRPs paragraph by paragraph, and to allow a little less than 1 hour for each, considering our 15 minutes break. Kindly be reminded that as announced at our opening session, the Bureau decided that adoption of L documents will be deferred to a later date. At a physical meeting organized back-to-back with a physical meeting of the working group on the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework or the 15th meeting of the Conference of the Parties, unless otherwise further decided by the Bureau. Before we begin, I would like to remind you that as you speak, your interventions are being translated into 5 other official UN languages by a team of dedicated interpreters. To facilitate the challenging work and make sure that we can all understand one another, please keep background noise to a minimum by wearing aware noise-canceling headsets and microphone sets, mute your electronic devices and notifications, check your sound using your own voice before joining the session. When providing your specific suggestions to the text, please read it at the station speed and be clear about where you like this suggestion to be inserted. Any specific text suggestions from an observer must be supported by at least one party. Parties may use the chat function for this purpose instead of asking for the floor, so we can save time. The use of chat function is limited to requests for technical support and expressions to support to the positions only. We now turn our attention to the first CRP of the day. CRP 6. This CRP was developed based on interventions made in plenary on Tuesday, 4 May, as well as written submissions made to Secretariat. As you can see, this is a short document with no brackets, where we are recommending COP to welcome the rolling work program of IPBES up to 2030, its progress, and ILPC inclusiveness, to take note of scoping reports, workshops, methodological and thematic assessments relevant to our convention. Request Secretariat to compile views of parties for a second global assessment before 2030, and encourage parties to carry national and subnational biodiversity assessments. I don't see any conflict in this document, so I hope we can approve it quickly. I would like to go to this paper paragraph by paragraph. So let's start with the first paragraph. Can we accept paragraph 1? I see no objections, so let's move to paragraph 2. I open the floor for comments on paragraph 2. UK, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a small point, Chair. In the third to the last line, it refers to encourages the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform. We would prefer it to be invites. We think that's a more appropriate language to use between the convention and the platform. So it's to replace encourages with invites in the third to the last line. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, UK. So we replace encourages by invites the IPBES to strengthen these efforts in implementation of the relevant objectives of the 2030 program in the last part of paragraph 2. Thank you very much. I see no more comments on paragraph 2, so paragraph 2 is approved. I open the floor for comments on paragraph 3. Canada.
Thank you, Chair. I believe we approved the preamble paragraph and paragraph 1. So I believe we're now in paragraph 2, which is where UK's comment is relevant. In this paragraph, so paragraph 2 that starts with also welcomes, we would remove the word other before stakeholders. It's about the 6th line or something like that, because we believe that IPLCs are not simply another stakeholder. So we would want to make sure that there's a difference. And in the second to last line, after IPBES, we would want to include the word continue to. So it would read, encourages the intergovernmental scientific IPBES to continue to strengthen these efforts in the implementation of the relevant objectives of the 2030 work program. Thank you.
Thank you, Canada. With these small insertions, paragraph number 2 on the operational part, let's say, we read, if we start by the middle, after IPBES 5.1, as well as its engagement with self-organized networks and organizations of indigenous peoples and local communities and stakeholders through the implementation of its stakeholder engagement strategy set out in Annex 2 to Decision IPBES 3.4 and invites IPBES to continue to strengthen these efforts in the implementation of relevant objectives. Thank you, Canada. Sounds better. I see no more comments. Then paragraph number 2 is approved. Now I open comments on paragraph 3, starting with Forte welcomes. Brazil, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning from Brazil, and nice to see you again. Brazil would suggest to rephrase this paragraph, as we understand that all the 6 objectives of the rolling working program of IPBES are equally important. So we would suggest some minor amendments, and that would read as follows, and I read in dictation speed. Further welcomes the fact that the rolling working program up to 2030 of the platform includes objectives related to each of the 4 functions of the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on biodiversity and ecosystem services, as well as strengthening communication and engagement of governments and stakeholders, and improvement of the effectiveness of the platform, implemented in a manner whereby the objectives are mutually supportive. Perhaps I went too fast for the secretariat.
Yes, can you repeat it at the extension speed? So this is after the third line, after IBES, as well as strengthening communication of, then can you continue?
Yeah, after the third line, as well as strengthening communication and engagement of governments and stakeholders, and improvement of the effectiveness of the platform, implemented in a manner whereby the objectives are mutually supportive.
Right. And then the sentence continue with as well as advanced work, or do you want to delete the second part of the sentence?
We would suggest having a more general language, because we think that all the 6 objectives are equally important, so we'd rather not specify one or another. So we would rather have a more general language to consider all the 6 objectives on equal footing.
So you suggest after mutually supportive full stop?
Yeah, full stop. Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Can Secretariat read how the paragraph would sound?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Graciela.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. So now the paragraph reads, further welcomes the fact that the rolling work program up to 2030 of the platform includes objectives related to each of the 4 functions of the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, as well as strengthening communication and engagement of governments and stakeholders, and improvement of effectiveness of the platform, implemented in a manner whereby the objectives are mutually supportive.
Thank you very much. I hope this insertion, this change, suggests to Brazil, from Brazil, to make it shorter and general and speaking on all objective is acceptable. I see no comments. Thank you, Brazil. So paragraph number 3 is approved. Now I open comments on paragraph 4, starting with takes note of the scoping reports. I just take a note. I see Brazil, Germany, followed by Germany and Ecuador. Brazil, you have the floor.
Take the floor once more. Regarding paragraph 4, Brazil would like to suggest deleting the final part of the paragraph that starts with to ensure the relevant information on concepts such as nature-based solutions and One Health is made available to assessment authors. As Brazil has consistently argued that the concept of nature-based solutions lacks a multilaterally agreed upon definition, so at this stage we do not find appropriate to invite other organizations to provide information on this concept, as this would somehow prejudge the outcomes of ongoing negotiations. So we would suggest deleting the last part of the paragraph, and then the paragraph would stop at the assessment through the formal review processes. Would have the last sentence and invites relevant organizations to contribute to the assessment through the formal review processes, and then full stop.
So you're suggesting to delete in the last second line after processes the rest of the sentence.
Yeah, the rest of the sentence. Yes, Mr. Chair.
So it would say take note of scoping reports of nexus and transformative change and the important scientific contribution of this assessment for implementation on post-2020, and invites relevant organizations to contribute to the assessments through the formal review process, full stop.
Yeah, that's it.
Without making mention to concepts of nature-based solutions and One Health. Now we give the floor to Germany, followed by Ecuador.
Thank you, Chair. At the beginning of the paragraph, we would like to replace takes note of by welcomes, as we believe that the COP should welcome these scoping reports because the planned assessments will be so relevant for the work of the Convention and the post-2020 framework. In addition, we would like to insert after the italic invites parties and, so it would read and invites parties and relevant organizations to contribute to the nomination of experts and participation in the assessment through the formal review process, full stop, and then, as Brazil just suggested, to delete the last part of this para. I can repeat again after and invites.
I think Secretariat can read it.
Perfect, thank you.
Secretariat, can you read the paragraph as it would sound?
Thank you, Chair. I will read the entire paragraph. It now reads, welcomes the scoping reports for the nexus and transformative change assessments and the important scientific contribution of these assessments for the implementation of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, and invites parties and relevant organizations to contribute to the nomination of experts and participation in the assessment through the formal review processes.
Thank you very much, Secretariat. Thank you, Germany. Now I'll give the floor to Ecuador, followed by Colombia.
Muy buenos días.
Good time of day, Chair. In line with what has just been said by Brazil, we would like to eliminate the reference at the end. Namely, we would agree with the drafting proposed by the Secretariat just now. Thank you very much. Excellent. Thank you, Ecuador. And now Colombia and then Costa Rica, please.
Chair, Colombia prefers to keep the last sentence. I mean, the proposal of Brazil, we prefer to keep of this reference about nature-based solutions and One Health, because of IPEDS will provide more information about these concepts, and it will be very relevant for the parties to know scientific and technical information about these concepts. So we prefer to keep, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Muchas gracias, Colombia.
Thank you very much, Colombia. I hope that we can find a solution, and please try and cooperate so that we can approve this paragraph. We were just taking note of how we're going to move ahead with the scoping reports, and we haven't had brackets up until now in this discussion. So Brazil has suggested that we've more of a simple wording that's been supported by certain countries. And there are others who want to leave it as it stands. So Costa Rica, perhaps you can help us to find a solution. Costa Rica, you have the floor. Thank you, Chair. We would like to maintain the last phrase of the paragraph because we think it could be super relevant for the next IPBES assessments. We very much support what Colombia has just said. Thank you. So, in general,
for the inclusion of welcomes, the scoping reports, and also invite parties and relevant organizations to contribute to nomination of experts on these assessments. And then the only difference is at the very last part. If we delete, there are some parties support deletion of the last part, some parties supporting to keep the text on to ensure that relevant information on concepts such as nature, concepts in general, such as nature resolutions and One Health, is made available to the assessment authors. Brazil is asking for the floor. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm sorry to take the floor once again. Regarding the amendment proposed by Germany at the beginning of the paragraph for replacing takes note with welcoming, we understand that takes note would be the most appropriate formula to address this issue, given the fact that the scoping reports are still under preparation and the scope reports have not been subject to approval by the IPBES plenary. So at this stage, we understand that it would be more appropriate to have takes note. Of course, the scoping reports will provide extremely valuable inputs for the discussions we have forward, but at this stage, we would rather keep the takes note at the beginning of the paragraph, given the fact that those scoping reports were still not made available.
Thank you, Germany. Colleagues, I hope we can make progress. I understand the point of Brazil that the scoping reports is a preliminary stage in the process of preparing these assessments. So maybe we can also maintain the takes note, because it's something temporary. It's not a full report yet or outcomes. I think it's right to invite also parties and relevant organizations to contribute, and then I would like to. I see the EU and Canada, and I hope we can find a solution to move on. We have many CRPs to work on, and really IPBES, we like to work with IPBES. Outcomes from IPBES are usual for our convention, and we want to keep working together. At the end of the day, I invite you to take a look at the end, what are we suggesting to COP in our recommendations to move on, and we want to keep working with IPBES. So I give the floor to EU, followed by Canada.
Thank you, Chair. And EU would strongly support the intervention from Germany. We think it's important to welcome the inception reports. We know they are under preparation, but considering their utmost importance, we would really support welcome, and in case to put welcome in brackets, but we really would support welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, EU. I give the floor to Canada.
Thank you, Chair. In line with our European colleagues, we would also want to welcome this report, and Canada had suggested the inclusion of the footnote 1, which refers to the pending approval by IPBES at its 8th plenary session. So we think that with this specification, we could leave the welcome in. But if we can't agree at this time, we understand that we might have to leave this in brackets. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Does anyone want to help me to find a solution on this paragraph? It was clean. Now we have brackets on welcomes and takes note, and also on the deletion of the last part. Inclusion for parties and nomination is being accepted. I really don't like to send brackets for the L document, please. UK followed by Argentina.
Thank you, Chair. Listening to what Germany and Canada have just said, I think we may need to keep the first part of this paragraph in brackets, because it does depend on decisions to be taken at IPBES. And when we get to COP15, we will know whether the assessments have been adopted. And in that case, we would welcome the adoption of the scoping reports and those assessments. At this stage, until the plenary meeting, which starts next week, we're not really able to confirm what the position should be on that.
Thank you, UK. Last intervention from parties. Argentina, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and good time of the day to you. Tiendo a coincidir con lo señalado por el delegado del...
I would agree with the UK it's difficult to know at this point in time, without reading the scoping report, to know whether we need to take note of it or welcome it. We could no doubt welcome the procedure of developing the scoping report that's already been developed. But if we want to directly refer to the report, I think we need to maintain the text in square brackets, welcomes and takes note, both in square brackets, to wait until it's adopted. Insisting on welcomes, I think we should then see welcomes the process for scoping or for developing the scoping reports for the next Nexus assessments, because this is something that's already taken place, and no doubt we can welcome the process to develop it. Then on the last phrase about nature-based solutions and the One Health references, we believe that this is too specific a reference for this paragraph. And of course, there's not clear agreement, and it's come up in lots of different documents in the CBD about nature-based solutions. But before we tell the experts what they should actually look at, I think we need to have a constructive debate on all of the elements that could be necessary to be included for the CBD, and we'd end up with a long list. So Argentina's idea that the most logical and least restrictive approach, which would allow all of the parties to collect information about these concepts, would be to eliminate this last part. Thank you. Thank you very much, Argentina.
Maybe we can all accept welcomes the process of developing the scoping reports for the Nexus and transformative change. That's something that maybe is a good solution. As we know, documents are not final. Scoping reports just one part in a long process in best. So we later will see the report of the assessments, and maybe this is a good way forward. I hope this is acceptable to not to leave this paragraph in brackets and still the discussion on the last part of the paragraph. We know it is important to have clarity on terms like nature-based solutions or ecosystem-based solutions or One Health that we will see in tomorrow on documents on health, but this is still in process. My suggestion is to keep it general. We're taking note of what IPES is doing with these assessments on Nexus and transformative change. Please, I think we can be more pragmatic and to move on. So I put on the table the suggestion from Argentina on the first part of the paragraph by welcomes the process of developing these scoping reports for the Nexus and transformative change. First, I'd like to hear about this point. I see EU. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. And even though I do have thanks to Argentina for trying to find a solution, but by the time we are to adopt this decision we are preparing here, we will have the scoping reports, and then it looks kind of funny to welcome the process for the scoping, just as has been also said by UK. So I think probably, even though I know you really don't want brackets, but perhaps here I would just leave the brackets for now, and at the time of COP they can be lifted without any worry. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So let's maintain paragraph 4 with all these brackets for the L document. Now I open the floor for comments on paragraph 5. I see no request for the floor on paragraph 5, so paragraph 5 is approved. Now I open the floor for comments on paragraph 6 for your text note. I see Brazil.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, once again. Well, Brazil would like to suggest deleting the last part of this paragraph, starting with and notes its relevance for the work of the convention. Because as we understand, since the report of the expert workshop on biodiversity and pandemics has not been subject to further review by parties, it would not be appropriate to note its relevance at this stage, even though we recognize that some of the inputs of the workshop are important. We'd rather not have this reference. So we would suggest rephrasing the paragraph as follows, keeping only the first part. Further takes note of the report of the expert workshop convened by IPBES on biodiversity and pandemics. Full stop. And then we'd suggest deleting the last part. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Brazil. Comments on Brazil's suggestion to stop the paragraph after third line, just mentioning the report of the expert workshop on biodiversity and pandemics. I see Germany followed by UK, Spain and EU and Belgium. Europe is here.
Thank you, Chair. In fact, I think the intervention goes a little bit in the other direction of what was just suggested. We would like to suggest to replace takes note of by welcomes the report, and we do in fact see it very relevant for the work of the convention. And seeing that the word expert has now been inserted before the word workshop, I think we believe that the COP should welcome this report and we don't agree to the deletion just suggested by Brazil. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I ask UK, Spain and Belgium if your intervention is to support what EU just said, or you have more specific language. If you have more specific comments, then I'll give you the floor. If it's to support, I fully understand you're supporting that. Belgium, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To keep it very short, we fully and entirely support the intervention by Germany. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we have two proposals. So one's to, instead of take notes, welcomes, if I remember. And welcomes, it's relevant. No, the report and its relevance for the work of the convention is maintaining the text on relevance for the work of the convention. I'm wondering where the welcomes is at the very beginning. I will ask Germany again to repeat. I think it's welcomes the report convened by IPBES on biodiversity and pandemics and its relevance to maintain it, right? Yes, I was. Germany, please.
Yes, correct, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Now I give the floor to Canada.
Thank you, Chair. While we agree that this report and the importance of the report and the outcomes, we have to point out to the fact that this did not went through a formal review process by the IPBES, and so we're a little bit in between here, where we did not have a full review process. So we would maybe, in terms of trying to find a compromise, perhaps we could suggest further takes notes with appreciation, and then continue with the rest of this paragraph. It would be hard for us to welcome just because of processes, but we would want to keep the remaining of the paragraph after pandemics and notes with its relevance and so on. We would want to keep that as we think it's important. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I would appreciate if Europe accepts with appreciation to take note with appreciation of the expert workshop, so we can say for the takes note with appreciation, the report, and then to keep the last part and takes note of relevant in brackets. Is that acceptable to EU? Or Germany, sorry. You have the floor, Germany.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Germany would be willing to accept the takes note of with appreciation if the remainder of the paragraph stays as it is and is not placed in brackets. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Argentina, you have the floor.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. We'd like to recall that this is an important report that was drawn up by a group of experts, and there was no nomination by parties, and its results were not reviewed by the parties. It's a document from a high-level expert workshop. So we think that placing emphasis on the results of this document at the level it's put forward by certain parties, because it's got aspects that they think are interesting for a decision in a multilateral convention, I think is a bit of an exaggerated path. We think that in this case, we can take note of the document. That's the right way to proceed. And at the same time, we need to delete the last part as Brazil has put forward. I think that's correct, because as it's not a negotiated document and it's not been reviewed by the parties, so there's different visions, and that came out very clearly in the plenary in the first reading when many parties highlighted these aspects. And if we'd had the opportunity to negotiate, for example, a report from policy advisors, then we'd be talking about a different situation. But I think that we have to be aware of the nature of this document and what we can do with it. Thank you. Thank you very much. So I would suggest then that we should approve paragraph 6 with takes note with appreciation. Oh, yes. We have to recall that Germany would accept takes note with appreciation if there's no brackets on the last part of the paragraph. There's no appetite from them to eliminate the last part. So I suggest that we should adopt paragraph 6 with brackets at the beginning, with welcomes in brackets, and then maintain the brackets at the end of the paragraph.
At the end, when we have the document and what is our real contribution in making recommendations to the COP. As I said, we love to work together with IPBES, and many outcomes are useful for our convention. And this is the easy document, colleagues. Now I open the floor for comments on paragraph 7. Brazil.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, regarding paragraph 6, we fully support the comments just made by Argentina, and we would prefer to stick to takes note only. And then perhaps we could leave this in brackets for a COP to decide. And regarding paragraph 7 now, Brazil would like to draw attention to the fact that this joint workshop between IPBES and IPCC was not open to government experts, which constitutes a violation of the provisions of both decision IPBES 3/3, which are the procedures for the preparation of platform deliverables, and more specifically paragraph 6.2d, and also the principles governing IPCC work, more specifically paragraph 7.2. So it is our understanding that this paragraph should be deleted, because of course, as previous COP decisions have said, we could encourage further work between climate change and biodiversity, but we need to abide by transparency, inclusivity, and fairness. And unfortunately, this was not the case with this joint workshop, which is not open to government experts and was also not open to further review. And we also note with concern that the report has not been made available, which further casts doubt on how we should embrace or address the outcomes of this workshop. So from our perspective, Brazil would suggest deleting paragraph 7, as this could set a dangerous precedent for future collaboration between IPBES and IPCC, which needs to abide by transparency and inclusivity. And unfortunately, this was not the case with this joint workshop. So Brazil cannot accept paragraph 7 as it stands right now. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Brazil. Brazil is proposing to delete this paragraph. I give the floor to Germany, followed by Switzerland.
Thank you, Chair. I don't believe I have raised my hand, but thanks very much. I had actually just put a question on how para 6 now reads. If you could kindly repeat that. I believe you suggested bracketing the welcome and bracketing the second part of the para, but that was my question on para 6, and then yes, I might come back.
I'll ask Secretary to read paragraph 6, please.
Thank you, Chair. So the paragraph begin with brackets in further takes note of, then closes brackets, open brackets welcomes, close brackets, the report of the expert workshop convened by the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, on biodiversity and pandemics, open brackets, and notes its relevance for the work of the Convention, including the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, as well as the work carried out under the Convention on the interlinkages between biodiversity and health, and close brackets.
Right, I hope it's clear.
Thank you.
2 brackets at the beginning and the rest of the paragraph. Now let's go back to paragraph 7. I see Switzerland followed by Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Switzerland doesn't share the view of Brazil at all. We read this text carefully and we understand that the only thing we do is welcome the cooperation and we encourage the exchange between the two parties. So there is no result that we approve or anything else. We heard a lot of delegations who said that it is important that climate change and biodiversity work hand in hand and complement each other, and therefore we think that this is one of the most important paragraphs of the decision of this recommendation, and therefore Switzerland want to maintain it. Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Switzerland. I give the floor to Canada, followed by EU.
Thank you, Chair. Along the lines of Switzerland, we believe that this is an important paragraph. We are welcoming the cooperation between the two groups, and we think that this is very important work that should be continued to carried out. Climate change is one of the main direct drivers of biodiversity loss, and we should treat it as it's needed. And we also believe that the footnote 5 answers some of the concerns from Brazil that clearly states that the workshop and the report have not been reviewed or endorsed or approved. And so we think that with this footnote and with the fact that we're only taking note of the report, we believe that this is acceptable and this paragraph should remain as is. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Canada. All right, paragraph 7 has 4 parts. One is welcome the collaboration between IPBES and IPPCC, takes note of this workshop, encourage them to continue working, and request parties to work with the national focal points on the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change in general. And rightly, you mentioned this footnote that is clear indicate that this report is not being reviewed, endorsed, or approved. I hope that can help the considerations from Brazil, or if you have any suggestions, because we're taking note of this report. And of course, climate change is one of the major drivers of biodiversity loss. We need also to address it. Meanwhile, I give the floor to EU, followed by UK.
Thank you, Chair. EU supports what has been said by Switzerland and Canada with regards to welcome the collaboration between IPBES and IPCC. We think this is very important. When it comes to the carrying out of the expert workshop and its workshop report, we think that this is a clear follow-up to the deliverable that has been decided in the last IPBES plenary, that has been modified due to the circumstances that were beyond everybody's control, consequence as a pandemic that we are all facing. And we think that considering the importance of the biodiversity climate change nexus, that we think that the report should be taken note with appreciation. As we haven't seen it yet, taking note with appreciation should probably put in brackets. We will see it next week. Thank you.
Thank you. So you suggest to include takes note with appreciation of the report. Then I'll give the floor to UK, followed by Colombia and Chile, and we will take a decision on this paragraph. We need to move on.
Thank you, Chair. As Switzerland, Canada and the EU, we support the retention of this paragraph. We believe this was a very important expert workshop. We believe it met all the procedures within IPBES and IPCC for an expert workshop. We have just one addition to make in the last part of this paragraph, where it requests parties to work with the national focal points. We think this should also refer to the national focal points for IPBES as well as IPCC. So it would read, requests parties to work with their national focal points for the Intergovernmental Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services and the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. We find it odd that we're referring just to IPCC in this part of the decision. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, UK. So you're suggesting in the last part of paragraph this precision after request to say parties to work with their national focal points for IPBES and the IPCC. Right. Thank you for. It's good to have a native English speakers helping us. Now I give the floor to Colombia. Colombia tiene la palabra, seguido de Chile.
So Colombia and then Chile and then Argentina, please. Thank you, Chair. As some other countries have already said, Colombia believes that this paragraph should be maintained, and perhaps to try and reach consensus and make progress in the negotiations, we could suggest that we could delete the part that says takes note of the report, and the last part saying requests parties, on the understanding that with the first reference of welcomes the cooperation, we're including the report and everything that's been worked on, and then with encourages, it's more general. And so it also includes this type of work with the national focal point, so that we keep it a bit more simple, more general, more open. But at the same time, we're leaving the mandate and the reference to the importance of these two fora and keeping it in a more general form. And with these two proposals, we hope we can move ahead so that this can be a more consensus-based paragraph to take account of these positions that are a bit divergent on the importance or not of dealing with this subject. Thank you very much, Colombia.
Suggestion from Colombia could be a possible way forward in order to retain this paragraph. So we can keep the first parts, welcoming the cooperation between IPBES and IPCC. We delete, takes note with appreciation the report of the co-sponsored workshop on biodiversity climate change, note with the conclusions therein, and recalling decision 1430 therein. And then to continue with and recalling decision encourages the two bodies to continue and further strengthen their collaboration with a view to increase coherence while avoiding duplication of work, and requesting parties to work with their national focal points for IPBES and IPCC with a view to supporting the integrated approach to assessments on biodiversity and climate change. Would that be acceptable for Brazil on this paragraph without mentioning these reports? Then we will not need the footnote, and we like them to keep working and to help us. I hope I'll give the floor to Brazil if this can be a way forward. I see that there's support from Switzerland, Canada, EU, UK, Colombia, and others to keep this paragraph, but maybe with this suggestion from Colombia will be easier. I'd like to know if Brazil can go along with this proposal. And to move on, colleagues, Brazil, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And we appreciate the efforts of the distinguished colleague from Colombia to try to find some common ground. But at this stage, we are not able to support this paragraph as proposed by Colombia. And we would also like to hear other parties. We see that there are other parties in the line, and perhaps they could find some solution to this issue and come up with a constructive way forward. But at this stage, unfortunately, we cannot support the paragraph as proposed by Colombia. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to Chile, followed by Argentina. Chile tiene la palabra.
Chile, you have the floor. Well, on the paragraph, we agree with the parties who have expressed the need to maintain it and the efforts that have been made to try and come up with a consensus, as has been recently put forward by Colombia. On this proposal made by Colombia, we think this needs to be supported and perhaps maintain the part that says recalling decision 14/36. I think it's important to underline the recalling of that specific decision. Thank you very much, Chile. So you're supporting Colombia's proposal to go for a simpler paragraph. Thank you. And now, Argentina, you have the floor. Thank you, Chair. We support Colombia's proposal, and we think that to be able to reflect some of the other concerns expressed by Brazil about the methodologies and the form in which cooperation has taken place between IPBES and the IPCC, and be able to improve it for the future, we would suggest that we change the welcomes and say takes note of instead. So it takes note of the cooperation between the IPCC and IPBES. And then we'd have the deletion proposed by Colombia, and recalling decision 14/36 encourages the two bodies to continue and further strengthen their collaboration in a transparent and participatory manner. That would be an addition, with a view to increasing coherence while avoiding duplication of work, and request parties. And here, in our opinion, requesting parties to have an integrated approach, I think, is slightly preempting the institutionality of countries as to how they deal with participation. An integrated approach could be a bit complicated in some cases. So we would suggest instead the following. Request parties to coordinate their work with the national focal points to the IPCC in relation to assessment of diversity and climate change. So, deleted. And would you like me to read that again? Well, I think that as you've just drafted it would be good, with the addition from the UK, I think, as well, about the IPBES national focal points as well. Yes, of course, there's Argentina. So I'm going to turn to the Secretariat now to read this out. A version with all of the amendments to see if it's acceptable for everyone. So please go ahead, Secretariat, now.
De acuerdo como ha sugerido Argentina.
In accordance with what Argentina has just suggested. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It reads, now the paragraph takes note of the cooperation between the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services and the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and recalling Decision 14/36 encourages the two bodies to continue and further strengthen their collaboration in a transparent and participatory manner with a view to increasing coherence while avoiding duplication of work, and request parties to coordinate their work with national focal points in relation to the assessment for IPBES and to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change with a view to supporting an integrated approach. And I think here, Argentina, you wanted to delete integrated approach. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes. So in my view, would read the national focal points to IPBES and IPCC in relation to assessments on biodiversity and climate change.
Right. So the mention in relation to assessments on biodiversity change is at the end, and there's a full stop, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Right. So can you read it again? And I will ask if this formulation can fly.
Yeah, so I will read again from the beginning, Chair. It reads, takes note of the cooperation between the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services and the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and recalling Decision 14/36 encourages the two bodies to continue and further strengthen their collaboration in a transparent and participatory manner with a view to increasing coherence while avoiding duplication of work, and request parties to coordinate their work with national focal points for the IPBES and the IPCC in relation to assessments on biodiversity and climate change.
Right. I hope this can be a way forward to have a clean text. Otherwise, we will keep with those many brackets. EU, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and really great thanks also to all the colleagues who tried to find consensus or agreed text without brackets here. I mean, we could barely live with this text under the condition that a reference to this upcoming expert workshop report is being kept. We find this to lose in this paragraph would be really bringing us backwards. So if this reference to the co-sponsored IPCC IPBES workshop can be brought back, then we could, with kind of in the spirit of compromise, go along with this compromise that has been presented here, which we find unfortunately very weak compared to what the initial paragraph has said. But we find it is really important to keep the reference to the upcoming expert workshop report from IPBES and IPCC. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I give the floor to Denmark, followed by UK, and we're going to move to the next paragraph. We almost have 1 hour.
Thank you, Chair. We are not happy with how the development of this para it has taken. Indeed, we believe that the cooperation should be welcome. For the transparent and inclusive manner, we think that that's an improvement, but we're not supportive of deleting the integrated approach for the work of IPBES and IPCC, because we believe that the interlinkages between biodiversity laws and climate change are so close. So we would really be unhappy to have the integrated approach out of this para. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Denmark. UK, followed by Sweden.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we would support really what the EU has said. I think without the reference to taking note of the co-sponsored workshop, we are actually taking a step backwards, and actually we're not referring to this very significant interaction of experts of IPBES and IPCC at all. And we can't accept that. We find the expert report a very useful. We look forward to it, let's say, because we haven't seen it yet, and we perhaps need to revisit this when we've seen the report. We could accept some of the amendments in the latter part of the paragraph, but we want to retain the reference to the workshop. Thank you.
Thank you, UK. Sweden.
Thank you, Chair. Well, on this para, we think that it has been weakened really by the interventions so far, and we come to think that in this situation it would really be better to bracket the para now, because we think we really need to keep the option to have a look at this document. Thank you.
Thank you very much. What I will propose, I see more hands up and we are not making progress. It's clear that we don't have an agreement on this paragraph. So my suggestion is to keep all the paragraph in brackets. And maybe with all these many suggestions, we can include an 7 alt with the suggestions from Argentina for consideration at the L document later. So with this, we close the discussions on this paragraph. And now I open the floor for comments on paragraph 8. I see no comments. I see no comment. Yes, I see now Canada and Spain. We need to finish with this document as soon as possible, please. Canada, you have the floor on paragraph 8.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try to be brief. In the second to last line after the second global assessment, we would add before 2030 and then remove consider a request to and by also, so that it would read to prepare a second global assessment before 2030 and to also prepare an assessment on ecological connectivity. Thank you, Chair.
So the last part would read, and invites the platform to prepare a second global assessment before 2030 and to also prepare an assessment on ecological connectivity. That's the way it would read with Canada's amendments. Germany, you have the floor on paragraph 8.
Thank you, Chair. On the last suggestion to delete consider a request and replace it by to also prepare, we would ask you to put this in brackets for now, as the arise in time for it. Please just put it there for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Germany. Then I'll ask Canada if there's some flexibility to keep the text as it is, just to include before 2030, so we can have a clean text. Canada?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can go along with this proposal.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So now I give the floor to Spain.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. Lola.
Thank you, Chair. Well, we don't want to hold things up, but the text as it was drafted with the last part to consider request to prepare an assessment on ecological connectivity, we think it doesn't bring any added value to IPBES's mandate to consider this within its work. So we would be in favour of Canada's proposal, and given considerations from other parties, we would be more in favour of maintaining Canada's proposal to also prepare, even if it's between brackets. And I know that you want to add in too many square brackets, but here we do prefer Canada's solution. Thank you. Okay, Spain. So Canada withdrew its proposal, and we're talking about consider a request to prepare an assessment. Well, CBD is inviting the platform to prepare the second global assessment before 2030 and to consider a request to prepare. Can you be flexible and leave it open as well, Spain, so that we can have a clean text, because Canada has already withdrawn its proposal? Yes, we understand, but Spain was going to make the same proposal and put down her hand when Canada came up with the same proposal to try and speed up the work. But we think that as it's drafted, it doesn't bring anything new, and we think it would be interesting to have clearer consideration here. So if there's no support from any other party, and in order to be flexible, then we'll express it as it drafted, although we really do prefer the Canadian proposal. Thank you very much for your flexibility there, Spain. So then we can approve paragraph 8 just by adding in before 2030 after the word assessment in the second last line. So now let's open up for comments on paragraph 9, requests the Executive Secretary. Switzerland, you have the floor.
Thank you. We recall very well in the discussion that many parties stressed the importance of a better exchange between the IPBES and the CBD processes. Now we have in para 9 one focus, and we think that it's very important to ask parties on their views, what would be needed in the work of IPBES, and here we don't want to have any change. But we realized that one element got lost in the CRP, and this is the cooperation between the secretariats in order to prepare inputs for discussion at the Substa. We consider that it is important that the secretariats, they exchange regularly in order to use synergies, in order to avoid duplications, but at the same time to allow parties to take advantage of the results of each other. And therefore, Switzerland was suggesting in the first reading that the Executive Secretary should also start a regular exchange. And therefore, we would like to add at the beginning of 9, we think it is more logic to start with a cooperation between the secretariats, and I can read the text that we will suggest, and then continue with the part as it is written now under 9. If you allow me, I will read the text in...
Please go ahead.
So we would start with requests the Executive Secretary and invites Executive Secretary of the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services to explore options for further strengthening cooperation, to identify deliverables for the work under the Convention on Biological Diversity, and of elements to be included in a second global assessment of biodiversity and ecosystem services. And then continue, the Executive Secretary will report on identified topics to Substa for discussion. And then I would continue with further request the Executive Secretary. This is the second part, that the parties are invited and the Secretariat will prepare an input to the work of IPES by the wishes of the party, the suggestion of the party. You want me to read it again, or?
Please, please.
So requests the Executive Secretary and invites the Executive Secretary of IPES to explore options for further strengthening cooperation, to identify deliverables for the work under the Convention on Biological Diversity, and of elements to be included in a second global assessment of biodiversity and ecosystem services. And the Executive Secretary will report on the identified topics to SBSTA for discussion. And you remember also that we were discussing if we need a standing item, agenda item in SBSTA to discuss the work that has been done and the reports that has been delivered by IPES. Like a little bit Brazil, they would like to have an opportunity to reflect on that and do it. And first, we thought it would be a good idea to have a standing agenda item, but now we think it's more practical if there is really something to discuss, that then in the SBSTA we should take it on board and should put it on the agenda. So it will not be a standing agenda item, but it would whenever the two secretariats, they identified topics that might be interesting for parties to discuss, that this then would be put on the agenda of SBSTA. And we also think that, as we understand, that IPES and IPCC, they are not composed by party delegations, but members in the panel. So this party involvement cannot directly be guaranteed within these bodies, but we can discuss it within the SBSTA. This is the role of SBSTA, as we understand it. So we would like to have this idea formulated in our text here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Switzerland, for this insertion to ensure collaboration among both secretariats. Now I give the floor to UK, followed by Argentina. Thank you, Chair. Our intervention was on the original paragraph, and it's just an issue in relation to timing. We felt that this request to the Executive Secretary and the peer review process should be considered by SBSTA prior to COP16, and rather than going straight to IPBES. Our understanding, looking at the proposals for the IPBES work programme, is that it would be appropriate to provide this input to the 11th plenary of IPBES in 2024, which would come after COP16, as far as we understand it. So we would simply suggest deleting the last part of the sentence, so it would read, submit the final report for consideration by SBSTA prior to COP16, full stop. Right, you're suggesting then to delete in advance of 9th session of IPBES, right? Yeah. And to put this into CBD process passing through SBSTA. Yeah, SBSTA and COP16. And COP16. Which would then report to IPBES at its 11th plenary meeting in 2024. But I don't think we need to spell that out in this decision. Can you repeat your insertion after? So it reads, submit the final report for consideration by SBSTA prior to COP16. Right. And then you delete the reference to the 9th session of IPBES. So now we have the first part of the paragraph with the insertion of Switzerland to ensure collaboration on both secretariats. Then the paragraph continues till the end, when the third last line and submit the final report for consideration of Substa prior to COP16 in order to maintain this peer review process under CBD realm. Thank you, UK. Give the floor to Argentina, followed by Canada.
Thank you, Chair. En nuestra opinión, originalmente en este
We thought originally in the text there was a list of more exhaustive elements that were going to be covered when we were making recommendations to IPBES as to advance towards the second global assessment. But now we've just mentioned one element, namely that it complements and contributes to the monitoring and review of the post-2020 global biodiversity framework. For us, there were other elements that were highly relevant. For example, reflecting the different challenges for the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity for developing countries and developed countries, and the need to expand the temporal analysis framework for the second assessment, dealing with colonial periods and so on, and all that has not been taken into account. So, for these submissions from the parties that the executive secretary will have to compile, for them to really reflect all the interests of the parties, our suggestion would be that we should eliminate the reference to ensure, among other things, that it complements and contributes to the monitoring and review of the post-2020 global biodiversity framework. So to delete that part, so that we can cover all of the suggestions and not just those who are referring to the monitoring framework or the monitoring of the framework. Thank you, Argentina. So you're suggesting that we should delete the specific point on monitoring and review and leave it more open to include other types of elements that would be relevant for the second global assessment. Exactly, says Argentina. So I'll try and read this paragraph. I'm very worried about time ticking away. And I'll take account of Switzerland's inclusions and then the deletion in the middle from Argentina, and also the inclusion put forward by the UK and the deletion of the final part. So this is how it would read.
And invite the Executive Secretary of IPBES to explore options for further strengthening cooperation to identify deliverables for the work under the CBD and of elements to be included in a second global assessment on biodiversity and ecosystem services, and further request the Executive Secretary to compile views of the parties on elements to be covered by a second global assessment on biodiversity and ecosystem services to be undertaken under the convention before 2030, and after peer review submit the final report for consideration by Substa prior to COP16. That will be the reading of this paragraph with these amendments. I haven't heard any objection for this elaboration, and I'll give the floor to Canada, followed by EU.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, having a hard time to digest all these new proposals, but at first hand, it seems fine. We want to include a reference to Indigenous peoples and local communities here. So after to compile views of parties, we would add comma, Indigenous peoples and local communities and relevant stakeholders, on elements to be covered, and then continue.
Right.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for the suggestion, Canada. So we include compiled views of the parties, IPLCs, and relevant stakeholders. Now I'll give the floor to EU, followed by Belgium.
Thank you, Chair. EU would like to maintain the reference to the monitoring and review of the post-2020 global biodiversity framework, and would hope we can refer to the text as it was before. I mean, it said to ensure, among other things, that it complements and contributes to the monitoring and review of the post-2020 global biodiversity framework. We think it is important to mention it here, and appeal to bring it back in the text. Thank you.
So you would like to insert, among other things, after making reference to monitoring and review of post-2020.
Yeah, well, it in the current text, I mean, in the original one when we started, it said to ensure, among other things, that it complements. So it was already there. So it was not only for the monitoring and review, but also, and I mean, as it's a very important element, so that's the reason why it was mentioned, and we thought it's very good that it's mentioned here.
I hope this can be acceptable to Argentina to leave the door open, so making reference to monitoring and review, but among other things, so that can give space to include the points referred by Argentina on other important elements for developing countries and so on. So I would like to see if Argentina can go along with this formulation. Meanwhile, I have Brazil, followed by Belgium.
We'd like to support the proposal made by Argentina, as we understand that when you're referring to ensure, in a way, we would be given priority to the monitoring and review of the post-2020 GBF. And as we heard in the plenary, many delegations have proposed to add new elements that should be equally considered in the process of elaboration of the second global assessment. We would like to also to support the proposal made by the UK, and regarding the proposal from Switzerland, which we find interesting, I think we would need more clarity regarding how the Secretariat would identify topics to be included in the second global report. We understand that the process of identification of topics should be carried out in consultation with parties, to ensure the relevance of the topics are going to be identified are also relevant for parties and the coherence of the work of both secretariats. So I guess, I'm not sure if I recall the end of the proposal made by Switzerland, but I think it says something to identify topics to be included in the second global assessment, I guess something like this, and we would suggest including in consultation with parties. As we understand it, do you hear me? I think I lost the connection.
Yes, it probably would read, invite the Executive Secretary, request the Executive Secretary and invite the Executive Secretary of IBES to explore options for further strengthening cooperation, to identify deliverables for the work under CBD, and of elements to be included in a second global assessment on biodiversity and ecosystem services in consultation with parties, is what Brazil
yes, that's it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Brazil. Thank you. I give the floor to Belgium.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And actually, our comment is on the addition by Switzerland on the first part of the paragraph. In fact, we were about to suggest a new paragraph, which basically runs along the same lines as the Swiss intervention. First, we would like to have it as a separate paragraph. Otherwise, this paragraph will run very long. And well, having long paragraphs in a CBD decision would not be a very first time that we have this, of course. But if I may, Mr. Chair, I would like to read the paragraph that we had prepared, so it may be placed together with the Swiss one, if that would be agreeable to you, Mr. Chair.
Read it.
Okay. There I go. I will first read it out regularly and then in dictation speed.
Go ahead.
Request the Executive Secretary to regularly and systematically assess and report to Substar on how to consider deliverables from all functions and processes of the IBES for the implementation of the Convention, including a forward schedule and a regular agenda item in meetings of Substar. So, Chair, as with you, we love to work with IBES, and we would like to go on like that.
Would that be in replacement of Switzerland suggestions?
That would indeed be a suggestion. So, with your indulgence, I would now read it at dictation speed.
Please.
and I will use the acronyms in order to speed up the reading.
Right.
Requests the Executive Secretary to regularly and systematically assess and report to Substa on how to consider deliverables from all functions and processes of the IPBES for the implementation of the convention, including a forward schedule and a regular agenda item in meetings of the Substa. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Belgium. So this would be in replacement of Switzerland's proposal by requesting the Executive Secretary to regularly and systematically assess and report to Substa on how to consider deliverables from all functions and processes of IPBES for the implementation of the convention, including a forward schedule and regular agenda item in meetings of Substa. It's not necessarily covering what Switzerland is including in paragraph 9, because it speaks more about collaboration between both executive secretaries of IPBES and CBD in identify these deliverables. So I believe this can be complementary. So probably this can be a 9 alt in order to have a kind of regular agenda item in Substa meetings to see how are we working and collaborating with IPBES. I believe that. So instead of replace, that can be an addition. Colleagues, I still very worry about the time. I see Switzerland asking for the floor and Argentina, last 2 interventions, and we need to move on. We're close to the break time. I hope we can cover the next 2 paragraphs after 9. We still remain 2 paragraphs. So Switzerland, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. I raised my head to answer to Brazil, because when you read my intervention, you forgot the last sentence where I said that the Executive Secretary will report on the identified topics to Substa for discussion. And this is also an idea that is in the Belgium text, that the Secretariat has to report to Substa, which makes sense. And this is the important part of it, that we discuss it within Substa, these deliverables, so that there is a party assessment of this. But I agree with you, we can leave it as alts, and then we can see if we can find when we have more time, a reduction that makes one paragraph out.
Thank you. Now I'll give the floor to Argentina, in particular, to see if it's acceptable the inclusion from at the end of, if we consider monitoring and review, because it's an important issue in the process we are for post-2020, and to leave it open and other topics, I think was the suggestion. Argentina tiene la palabra.
You have the floor, Argentina. Go ahead. My understanding of the proposal from the European Union is that they wanted to go back to the original wording where it says to ensure, among other things, that it complements and contributes to the monitoring and review of the framework. If the European Union wants to maintain this reference, then we need to include the references that I've already mentioned. And if you wish, I can read these out so that they can be included in the text. In particular, to ensure, among other things, that it complements and contributes to the monitoring and so on, blah, blah, framework that incorporates examples of the different challenges faced by developed and developing countries for the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity, and that considers the expansion of the time frame of analysis of the assessment to include degradation of biodiversity since the first industrial revolution and colonial periods as appropriate.
I see your point.
El motivo de inclusión es que había un listado largo en su...
It's because there was a long list and now we're just picking up one single element. So if we're just going to mention one single element, then we need to mention all of the elements. Now, we know that the parties are going to be able to submit their views, so we don't need to actually specify this and just have all of the views being submitted by the parties as to what is going to be necessary to be considered by the second global assessment. Well, thank you, Argentina. My proposal is the following. In paragraph 9, we would approve the paragraph with the inclusion from Switzerland and with the amendment from Brazil. And we put the middle part in square brackets where it refers to the monitoring and review of the GBF. And then we could continue. So basically, we would leave the paragraph with square brackets just in the middle with that reference to monitoring and review, and also including the suggestion from Argentina. So the paragraph would read as follows. And I'll read out in particular the corrections.
And invite the Executive Secretary of IPBES to explore options for further strengthening collaboration second global assessment of system services with identify topics to Substa for discussion and compile views of parties, indigenous peoples and local communities and relevant stakeholders and to by a second global assessment of biodiversity and ecosystem services. And then brackets, in particular to ensure, among other things, that it complements and contributes to the monitoring and review of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, closing brackets. Then, as appropriate, to be undertaken under the Convention before 2030, and after peer review, submit the final report for consideration of Substa prior to COP16. That is what we can approve with the brackets in that part. I hope this is acceptable, and also with the addition of the paragraph from Belgium for regularly and systematically address and report to Substa this process. I hope this is acceptable. I see Colombia and Argentina colleagues. We are over the time of the break. I hope we can make progress, please. I invite you to help me to move on. I'm in your hands. Colombia. Podemos aceptar como acabo.
And you accept the paragraphs as I've just read them out, Colombia? Thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor again. We think this paragraph has got lots of different changes and inclusions, and it's very difficult to follow this and all this and see how it actually stands. So we'd like to keep it in square brackets and then continue with the discussion. And I'd just like to recall that the IPBES Secretariat has its terms of reference as well, and going into such detail here, we think well, we want to have science-based objectives after all, and we want to have independence of the parties. So given all that, for the second global assessment, including so many elements, could perhaps not be suitable. So we would suggest we should maintain this in brackets for the moment. And we understand that the spirit is to try and continue with the negotiations and try and move forward as much as possible. Thank you, Columbia. So I suggest that we should accept the changes in the paragraph and just leave in brackets the reference to monitoring and review as Argentina has requested. Otherwise, I don't think there were any other conflicts. I think it's actually improved the drafting, the other suggestions, and I suggest that we should adopt that paragraph as I read out. Argentina, you have the floor. Thank you, Madam Ms. Chair, and thank you for this proposal to try and move ahead with the discussion. We put forward these proposals in the first reading and they haven't been included here, and it's problematic that we've taken up what some parties have wanted and then other parties have flagged something up as important, but it hasn't appeared anywhere in the text. So please, we can put our suggestions as well in brackets for further discussion. Yes, so there would be two sets of square brackets in the middle, one part with the sentence that you had suggested, Argentina, where we would be deleting the reference to monitoring and review and including the text that you read out to us, which includes the examples of different challenges faced by developing countries. For example, here I'm trying to translate it back into Spanish for consideration and so on. Yes, we've got that text. So we would include the two sets of square brackets. Thank you very much. So I suggest that that's how we should approve it, with these two big sets of square brackets in paragraph 9. And I would like to invite comments on paragraph 10, and let's hope there are no comments on paragraph 10. No, I cannot see any comments on paragraph 10. Oh, Canada. On paragraph 10?
Again, and we just want to make sure that we don't limit ourselves in when considering nominations. So instead of saying a representative, we would want to suggest invites the IPES to contribute to the work of the ad hoc technical expert group and so on. So we would remove the section that says consider nominating a representative to participate in. Thank you, Chair.
Canada, to contribute?
The paragraph would read invites the IPES to contribute to the work of the ad hoc technical expert group on indicators for the post-2020 GBF.
Okay, thank you very much. So it's less prescriptive.
Exactly.
So when invited to contribute, it could be through nominating a representative or other ways. Thank you, Canada. I hope that can be approved. EU, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and very sorry to kind of take the floor again, but my intervention is kind of between the paragraphs 9 and 10. So if I may, when we were in our introductory statements, we have expressed our view that we should really ensure the full inclusion of these deliverables and knowledge item in CBD processes of all, not only the ones of the assessment or the global assessment. So we would have a text proposal for this, but because unfortunately it was not taken up. I mean, this idea which we expressed in our initial statement has not found its way into the CRP in front of us. So if you allow me, I would bring in this idea, wording to this idea.
Are you suggesting a new paragraph?
Yes, 9 bis.
9 bis. Very quickly, please. I'm kind of reluctant to keep complicating more our text, and that can also be done when we are at the L document. I'm really worried about it. If it's short, say it. If it's accept, we move. If not, we put it in brackets and move on, please. But I invite all parties to help me to move on. We are already complicating our schedule. I don't believe we're going to make the 3 documents. We spend over half of the time. We need to have a break. And this is in cascade, lagging all our work. Please, I invite you for your cooperation. EU, go ahead with your new proposal for 9 bis.
Thank you, Chair. It would read, request the Executive Secretary to identify views from parties on how the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services could, within its defined functions on producing further assessments, building capacity, strengthening knowledge, and supporting policy, contribute to the monitoring and review process of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Let's finish first with paragraph 10, and then we go back to 9 bis. Can we approve paragraph 10 with amendments on inviting IPBES to contribute to the work of the ATEC on indicators? I hope there is no objection. Argentina, you have the floor.
Gracias, señor presidente. Y si bien...
Thank you, Chair. Now, we know that IPBES will have a role to play in ATEC on indicators and the monitoring framework. We wonder whether it's correct to include it in this specific recommendation. Perhaps we should talk about all of the invitations to all of the organizations that are going to have to participate in the ATEC and deal with that in the decision on the global monitoring framework. And we've had ample discussions on this, where it refers to other organizations that other parties would like to invite to participate in the ATEC. So our suggestion is that in order to mix things up, because here we're talking about IPBES's work programme, that we should remove this paragraph from this decision and put it in the decision on the monitoring framework, which refers to the ATEC, so that we consider all of this together and make it very clear and have a coherent, consistent approach vis-a-vis all the other institutions that we're asking to help us within this ATEC and also in drawing up the monitoring framework. That would be our suggestion, to remove it from this decision completely and consider it within the context of the other one. Thank you very much, Argentina.
If I may, I support Argentina to delete paragraph 10 because we have terms of reference for the establishment of ATECs, and those include the invitation to relevant stakeholders in addition to parties. I mean, we're too prescriptive. So my suggestion as chair is to delete this paragraph. We're repeating things that are already in the modus operandi for establishing the ATECs, and of course, IPBES is an implicit one. We need to stop for interpreters. I allow for the indulgence of interpreters on 5 minutes more, and we should be close 12 minutes ago. To go quickly, I hope it's acceptable, my suggestion for deletion on paragraph 10, and go for comments on paragraph 11. Comments on paragraph 11. Colombia, followed by Indonesia. We have few minutes, please.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. Preferimos mantener.
Thank you, Chair. We prefer to maintain paragraph 10. Okay, well then let's put it in square brackets. Thanks. Indonesia.
On paragraph 11.
Thank you, Chair.
Go ahead.
On paragraph 11, Indonesia would like to add assistance, capacity building after the word to provide on the second last line of the paragraph. So the sentences will read, and parties in a position to do so, to provide technical assistance, capacity building and financial support, as appropriate, full stop.
Thank you very much, Indonesia.
Thank you, Chair.
I hope this is acceptable to adopt paragraph 11. I'll give the floor to UK.
Just a small correction to the last part of the sentence, to use the normal language I think we use here, which would be to read, urges parties, invites other governments and organisations in a position to do so to provide technical and financial support. I think that's the normal way in which we refer to this type of support. Urges parties, invites other governments and organisations in a position to do so, to provide technical and financial support. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Yukio. That's the usual language we use. With this, I put for approval on paragraph 11. I see no objections, and now I'd like to put for approval the suggestion from, I think it was Belgium, on 9 bis, request the Executive Secretary to identify views of parties. Is there any objection to inclusion of 9 bis? Can we approve 9 bis as well? I see Canada.
Can we simply read the paragraph in its full sentence, please, Chair?
You mean 9 bis?
Yes, please.
Okay. Request the Executive Secretary to identify views from parties on how IPES could, within its defined functions, on producing further assessments, building capacity, strengthening knowledge and support policy, contribute to the review and monitoring process for post-2020 global biodiversity framework. This is what was suggested. I hope this is acceptable. Can we approve 9 bis? Do you have any objection, Canada? I see no objections, then 9 bis is also approved. And with this, we approve this CRP document. Thank you very much. We need to go to the break and see you in 15 minutes. Thank you all. Welcome back. We will now continue with our next agenda item. I'd like to first let you know that I saw a chat comment from Argentina. Argentina was asking for an additional amendment to paragraph 11 of previous document on IBES, since the request was after paragraph 11 was adopted and CRP document. I request my colleague from Argentina to include its suggestion when we dealt with the L version of the document, so we don't need to reopen a document already adopted. I thank in advance to Argentina for flexibility on this, and surely we'll have the opportunity to include this amendment when we open the L document for discussion in a later meeting. Thank you very much. And so we continue. Let's move on to CRP 5 on biodiversity and agriculture, which was developed based on interventions made in plenary on the 25th and 26th February and on 23 May, as well as written submissions to the Secretariat. Dear colleagues, the operative part of this document is short and contains no brackets, and where in general we are adopting the Plan of Action 2020-2030 for the International Initiative for the Conservation and Sustainable Use of Soil Biodiversity, encouraging parties, relevant organizations and stakeholders to support the Plan of Action through different activities, including restoration, technical support, monitoring and financial resources, and take note of FAO's report, and requesting the Secretariat to provide information on activities and results from the implementation of the Plan of Action to SBSTA before COP17, and to maintain collaboration with FAO, UNCCD, UNFCCC, and other UN organizations, biodiversity-related conventions, and the UN Decade of Ecosystem Restoration. This is the summary of the whole document. I hope we can focus on what are we sending to COP to move in this important issue. The rest of the document is the annex with the draft Plan of Action 2020-2030 for the International Initiative for the Conservation and Sustainable Use of Soil Biodiversity, that I will explain in more detail once we finish with the operative part of this CRP document. I hope we can approve it expeditiously. Now, I'd like to go to the recommendations paragraph by paragraph. So I open the floor on comments to paragraph 1 of this document. The floor is open. Paragraph 1, starting with welcomes. I see no request from the floor, so paragraph 1 is approved. Now I give the floor on comments for paragraph 2. I see Switzerland.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Yes, we have a comment on paragraph 2, and we see that there here in this draft, the welcomes has changed into takes note of the report. We said it in the plenary clearly, and we also heard others welcoming this report entitled State of Knowledge on Soil Biodiversity, etc. And we suggest to keep takes note of the report instead of also welcomes. Sorry, we suggest to have it also welcomes instead of just takes note. Apologies.
Thank you, Switzerland, but it was a party, it was Argentina who requested to have take notes. Can you leave with takes note to have a clean text, or we keep both in brackets? Switzerland?
We would insist it should say welcomes the report. Thank you.
Okay, so I submit for approval paragraph 2 with brackets on takes note and also welcomes. I see no more comments on paragraph 2, so paragraph 2 is approved. Now I open to approve paragraph 3, which starts with also takes note. I see no objections to approve paragraph 3, then is approved. Now paragraph 4. Paragraph 4 that recommends that the Conference of the Parties adopt a decision on the following lines. I ask to approve the preambular part, which includes recalling decisions, acknowledging and recognizing only. We don't go yet to paragraph 1 of the recommendation to COP. I see Indonesia, followed by Argentina. Indonesia, you have the floor.
Okay, on para 4. Thank you very much, Chair. On para 4, Indonesia would like to support the original text that says, urge parties to address the drivers of soil biodiversity loss and land degradation. Indonesia would like to develop current text that says, urge parties to address the direct and indirect
Please. Please remind Indonesia that paragraph 4 is very long on the recommendation to parties, and we are not going to paragraph 4 or paragraph 4. I'm sorry for the redundancy. I'm now asking only to approve the text of the preambular part of the recommendation, which is going by starting by recalling decisions, acknowledging and recognizing. Then we will go one by one, and I can give you the floor when we reach to paragraph 4 of paragraph 4. If you can wait. I hope there are no objections to the preambular part, starting with recalling, acknowledging, and recognizing. I see Argentina and Colombia. Do you have any objections or amendments to this preambular part? Argentina, tiene la palabra.
Gracias, señor presidente.
The floor, Argentina. Thank you, Chair. We don't have comments on the first 2 preambular paragraphs, but on the 3rd preambular paragraph, we have a comment. In the last line, where it says, more sustainable food systems, we had asked to change this expression, sustainable food system, by more sustainable agriculture, based on the understanding that for the moment we don't have a multilaterally agreed upon definition of food systems within the scope of this term could be far greater, in fact, than what we're trying to deal with in this recommendation in the CBD in general. That is why our recommendation is that we should talk about sustainable agriculture, where we have clarity and which is clearly the theme of this recommendation. Thank you. So instead of saying food, you want to put agriculture. Is that correct? Yes, exactly, says Argentina. Thank you, Argentina. So we're talking about agro-biodiversity here. Colombia now, please. You have the floor. Thank you, Chair. Colombia does not have any objections. We just have a small inclusion that we'd like to make. And we request that in the plenary already for the 3rd preambular paragraph, recognizing. And then for climate change and mitigation and adaptation. And then we would continue with the paragraph. So to repeat, for climate change, mitigation and adaptation. And then we would continue with the paragraph as already drafted. So then that would mean that in English it would read,
key in the functioning of sustainable agricultural systems for food and nutrition security for all, for climate change mitigation and adaptation, comma, the transitions toward more sustainable agricultural systems and to enhance the achievement of the SDGs.
Correcto, señor presidente.
Yes, that would be correct, Chair. Thank you very much, Colombia. So with that, I suggest that we should approve the preambular paragraphs. Belgium, you have the floor.
Belgium, you have the floor. No le escuchamos.
Thank you, Mr.
Couldn't hear you.
In this paragraph, we would like to keep both the agricultural and food systems. We think the food system is much broader indeed than the agricultural system, but at this stage, we would like to keep both notions in. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Can you repeat again?
So in the third preambular paragraph, where I think it's Argentina who asked to replace food system by agricultural systems, we would like to keep both in for the moment because we think food system is broader than agricultural systems. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So you mean food and agricultural systems?
Yes.
Okay. Costa Rica follow Switzerland, and I hope we can move to operational paragraphs. Costa Rica tiene la palabra.
You have the floor, Costa Rica. Thank you, Chair. Costa Rica prefers to keep in food systems. There's lots of documents from the FAO where they talk about this conceptual framework and the concept of food systems. So we prefer to keep it in there. Thank you, Costa Rica. Now, Switzerland, please.
Suiza, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I can be brief. We support Belgium and Costa Rica, and it should say, we suggest to keep food systems, and it should say agricultural and food systems. We prefer this order. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Switzerland. Brasil, tiene la palabra.
Have the floor now, Brazil.
Once again, I'll just ask for your indulgence to repeat the paragraph as with the proposed amendment by Colombia, I guess, because I think I lost when you repeated.
Sí. Yes, the paragraph which reads in the third line, sustainable agricultural systems for food and nutrition security for all, for climate change mitigation and adaptation, a transition towards more sustainable agricultural and food systems, and to enhance the achievement of SDGs. That's what it reads now, as it reads now. Brasil?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We appreciate the proposal made by Colombia, but we'd rather keep only the reference to climate change adaptation. And we'd also support the comment made by Argentina, given the fact that even though the expression food systems has been gaining traction, we should stick to those definitions that have a more clearly defined, multilaterally agreed upon definition. So we would suggest deleting mitigation and also sticking to the proposal made by Argentina on agricultural systems. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Brazil. So you suggest that the paragraph reads nutrition security for all for climate change adaptation only, the transition towards more sustainable agricultural systems. But I have support to keep the text as and food. So my suggestion is to approve this paragraph, the third preambular paragraph, by including climate change adaptation and to keep in brackets and food systems, to more sustainable agricultural and in brackets and food systems. Is that acceptable? Can we approve in that way this paragraph? Switzerland, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just regarding the term food systems, we would just to draw your attention that this year we have a UN summit on food systems. I think this is a very known term, and therefore it shouldn't be in brackets. Thank you very much.
I understand, Switzerland, but There's a request to put it in brackets already. And if there is no agreement and we need to move on, let's keep and put in brackets and adopt the paragraph with these brackets. So the third paragraph is approved if there are no objections. Now I open comments on paragraph 1. Adopts the plan of action. Germany.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dear colleagues, we propose to delete the term voluntary and rather use the term instrument than means. The last 2 lines would read accordingly, and considers it an instrument to support the implementation of the post-2020 GBF. Thank you.
Thank you, Germany. So we're adopting the plan of action as contained in the annex and considers it an instrument to support the implementation of post-2020. Brazil, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm sorry to take the floor once again. Well, we really appreciate your efforts in considering our written comments with specific amendments to the plan of action. But given the fact that we're still going to discuss the plan of action, we would rather keep this whole paragraph in brackets, as we understand that we still need for discussions on, especially on the priority actions and other sections of the document. So we would rather prefer to leave the paragraph in brackets. Regarding the proposal just made by Germany, we would prefer to stick with the original phrasing of the paragraph, but perhaps to try to find some common ground, we would suggest adding in at the end of the paragraph in accordance with the national circumstances and priorities.
All right. So Brazil, you accept the change to consider as an instrument to support implementation in accordance with national circumstances and priorities.
Yes, that's it. But okay. We would suggest
by the meantime to keep this paragraph in brackets until we take a look on the annex, right?
Yes. Thank you very much.
Understood. So this is pending. It's not approved. It's pending. And then we take a look and then go back if we see we can release brackets. Argentina, and then we will move to paragraph 2.
Gracias, señor presidente. En línea con...
Thank you. In line with Brazil's comments, we think it's important to first of all review the whole document before we endorse this paragraph. So it does need to be maintained between brackets. We think that's the best way to proceed, but we think it's very important to maintain the reference to it being voluntary. We think that basing of this on having an instrument on soil biodiversity, which is fully an area being developed, and we've got information that's more present in some regions than other. So we have to see whether it's going to be the adequate instrument for sustainable use of soil biodiversity throughout the whole world for post-2020 would be a bit early. So I think it is important to keep this reference to voluntary, given all of that context. Thank you.
Gracias, Argentina.
Thank you, Argentina.
Considers it as an instrument to support the implementation of post-2020 framework. I would like to suggest on a voluntary basis and in accordance with national circumstances and priorities. Probably that can be a way forward. If there is no objections, let's keep this paragraph in brackets with these amendments, considering an instrument to support implementation on a voluntary basis and in accordance with national circumstances. Let's move to paragraph 2. Can we adopt paragraph 2? Taking note. Switzerland.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And in line with our previous comment, we suggest to mention here welcomes the report as mentioned previously, instead of just takes note. We consider this a very important report, and we have mentioned this in plenary, and we heard others doing the same. Thank you very much.
Well, it's exactly the same situation as the last paragraph. There was a party suggesting to take note, so we can leave takes note in brackets and also welcomes in brackets, both. Can we adopt paragraph 2 with these two brackets? I see no comments on paragraph 2, then paragraph 2 is approved. Now I submit paragraph 3 for approval, starting with encouraged parties. I see no request from the floor. Belgium.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, this is just an amendment to be in line with the current discussion under SBI agenda item 7, and to add after capacity building and development, and keep this up to date with the other discussions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Belgium will say to support implementation of and capacity building and development of the plan of action. Can we approve paragraph 3 as amended? I see no comments, then paragraph 3 is approved. Now I submit for approval paragraph 4, Japan. Japan, you have the floor.
Yeah. Hello?
Yes,
can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. And in the operational paragraph 4, I think the description regarding harmful incentives to soil biodiversity has been newly added in the middle part of the paragraph. So, and in this part, Japan believes that it is very important to identify harmful subsidies and other harmful incentives based on their experience in the process of achieving the H biodiversity target. So we would like to suggest to add the word identify just before phase out and eliminate incentives, taxes, and subsidies in the second line of the current paragraph. Thank you very much.
So can you repeat your suggestion?
Okay, the second line of the paragraph 4, after
yes.
and to identify, phase out, and eliminate incentives, taxes, and subsidies harmful to soil biodiversity. Just add identify before phase out.
Yes, the thing is there are three ands in that line. One thing is and to identify.
And to identify.
Up to identify.
Yes, that's all.
Comma, phase out and eliminate. Yes. Okay, thank you very much, Japan.
Thank you very much.
Indonesia asked for the floor before on paragraph 4, so you have the floor now, Indonesia.
I truly apologize for the previous intervention.
Okay.
On the paragraph 4, Indonesia would like to support the original text chair. Indonesia would like to delete several elements in the developed current text. Particularly first, the direct and indirect drivers. So we would like to eliminate the direct and indirect. And second, we also would like to delete including land use change, comma, and to phase out and eliminate incentive, comma, taxes, and subsidies harmful to soil biodiversity share. We have the rationale that Indonesia would like to support the global work on establishing measures to fight soil biodiversity loss and land degradation. However, due to the parties' uniqueness and special circumstances on their geographical characteristic, these measures should be further regulated and translated by the parties in accordance with their unique characteristic and circumstances here. Thank you.
So Indonesia, what you're suggesting is to delete after land degradation?
We would like to delete two elements, Chair. First, the direct and indirect.
Yes.
And then the second is including land use change until biodiversity, including land use change.
So to delete the rest of the paragraph.
Yes, correct, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, so you are simplifying by deleting the direct and indirect drivers.
Yes.
So what paragraph 4 would say is urge parties to address drivers of soil, biodiversity loss
and land degradation. Yes, Chair, like the original proposed text, Chair. Thank you.
Without going to details on incentives.
Yes, correct, Chair. Thank you, Chair.
Now I have on my list Argentina.
Gracias, señor presidente. Nuestra intervención.
Thank you, Chair. Our intervention is in line with what has just been said by the distinguished delegation. There have been lots of discussions about direct and indirect drivers, and not mentioning it here could facilitate our understanding of this text, and including specific elements in the last part we think would mean that we'd have to have other considerations included. So to keep it clean, that's why we're proposing to eliminate it. Otherwise, we have to talk about trade regulations and other types of multilateral agreements that also deal with these subjects. And we think it's going to complicate the discussion given the limited time. Thank you very much, Argentina.
Approve the paragraph 4 as amended, saying urgent parties to address the drivers of soil, biodiversity loss, and degradation. Are there any objection? Colombia, ¿tiene alguna objeción a aprobar el párrafo 4?
Do you have any objection to approving this? No, it's not an objection in paragraph 4, but we would prefer, to save time, to keep the paragraph as proposed and put it in brackets to reflect all of the different elements such as direct and indirect drivers, that could be put in brackets, and then including land use change, and phase out and eliminate incentives. We think these are very important points, very important elements for the conservation and sustainable use of the soil. Thank you, Chair. So I'm hearing proposals to be simpler in the paragraphs, but it seems that we're adding more square brackets. So let's try and be more flexible so that we can really make progress. And I'd like to remind you that we have to bear in mind that this is what we're recommending to COP, to continue work on this subject. And sometimes giving too many details makes things more complicated. So you're asking basically for the whole paragraph to be put in square brackets, so we could be put in square brackets, and then let's go on to paragraph 5. Thank you very much, Chair, for taking account of that.
For consideration to approve paragraph 5, Brazil followed by Austria.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, once again. And in line with the previous comments made by Argentina and Indonesia, regarding paragraph 5, we would like to suggest deleting the last part of the paragraph, which starts with including incentives and other measures such as tax and subsidies to promote sustainable soil management. As we understand that this will entail a discussion on trade-related obligations, and this will not be the appropriate forum to address this sort of discussion here. So we would rather delete the last part of the paragraph.
Gracias, Brazil. Give the floor to Austria.
Thank you, Brazil. Now Austria.
Thank you very much, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. Until paragraph 4, to bring it back on that. But is it correct that we approve this paragraph with brackets around the proposed changes to the paragraph, but no brackets around the whole paragraph? Because I have indeed a procedural question. I fully understand that in the negotiations here, we put brackets that propose new text, which is objected by parties, into brackets. but it's a procedural question that we do then not put the whole paragraph in brackets. So maybe you could give me some procedural clarification on that. And it's my taking that paragraph 4 stays, but it has in the paragraph brackets around some words. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Austria. I understand that Colombia requests the whole paragraph to be in brackets. That's why it's all in brackets. And we have the deletion of direct and indirect drivers, and also the inclusion to identify phase out, as suggested by Indonesia, but the whole paragraph is in brackets. I hope that clarifies your question. And I will try to be more slow while keeping details on all these changes. Let's continue with paragraph 5. I have Indonesia followed by Belgium.
Thank you, Chair. On paragraph 5, Indonesia also would like to align ourselves with Brazil previously. We would like to delete 2 elements here. First, at all levels, and second element, including incentive and other measures such as tax and subsidies. The rationale is quite clear, and then we would like to re-emphasize that what we've been conveyed previously, Chair. So we cannot afford to prejudice that conservation, restoration, and sustainable use of soil measure. We're directly related with the incentive, taxes, and subsidy. So we think it needs further discussion to determine what kind or what variable of integration that will be effectively work to the parties and in this document.
Thank you,
very
Indonesia.
much.
You suggest to stop the paragraph after relevant policies.
Yes, correct, Chair. Thank you.
Belgium, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, actually, we share the same concern that Austria just raised, and we think we should at least keep the part of the paragraphs that we don't have any concerns on. So I'm not sure if we could go back to paragraph 4, but at least in paragraph 5, at least, well, we could put into brackets the end of the paragraph and keep the rest of it, because for Belgium, this is an important part in order to promote sustainable soil management, the incentives and the other tax and subsidies. So we would at least want to keep that in brackets for the moment. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And and in paragraph 5, we also had another addition after in the second line, for soil biodiversity in agricultural systems. We would have liked to add and other managed ecosystems. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Belgium. So in paragraph 5, Belgium is suggested to include in the second line into agricultural systems and other managed ecosystems. And then it goes until land and soil management development programs and relevant policies. Then we have brackets for the rest of the paragraph. So if there is no objection to the inclusion of Belgium and other managed ecosystems, I propose to approve paragraph 5 with the inclusion of another managed ecosystems and with brackets after relevant policies till the end of the paragraph. I see no objections. Brazil, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Brazil would like to suggest leaving the proposal made by Belgium on managed ecosystems in brackets, as we understand that the concept of managed ecosystem lacks a clear definition, and I think we do not have previous decisions of CBD related with the specific definition or addressing the concept of managed ecosystems. So at this stage, we'd rather keep the proposal in brackets. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. What we're trying to say with this paragraph is development programs and policies. let's don't forget the focus of what we're saying, please. I have Colombia followed by Indonesia, and I hope we can move to the next paragraph.
Muchas gracias, señor.
Thank you very much, Chair. Well, we agree with the inclusion from Belgium. And after the Belgian inclusion, we'd like to make another addition that would refer to and other sectors identified by previous COP decisions, and then we'd continue with the paragraph as it is. I'll repeat that.
Belgian inclusion, we propose to include other sectors identified by previous COP decisions. En el sentido que
the idea here is that soils are impacted not just by agricultural activities. Thank you, Colombia.
I hope the insertion of Colombia is acceptable and other sectors identified by previous COP decisions. So I'd like to receive some feedback. And so far in this paragraph, we have the first line clean, and in the second line, after agricultural systems, we have brackets in and other managed ecosystems, closing brackets. Now the session of Colombia and other sectors identified by previous COP decisions. And we continue to next line, and after relevant policies, another set of brackets for the rest of the paragraph. Indonesia, again, you have the floor, followed by Argentina.
Thank you very much, Chair. We will be very short. We would like to support Brazil, then Belgium, that the other managed ecosystem to be bracket. Thank you very much, Chair.
Well, I think the suggestion of another managed ecosystem was from Belgium, but I understand you support those brackets.
Yes.
Now, Argentina,
Thank you.
You have the floor.
Gracias, señor presidente. Y en línea.
Thank you, Chair. And in line with Indonesia and Brazil, we want to maintain the brackets around other managed ecosystems and also around the inclusion from Colombia. And I'd like to tell the delegations that we're talking about a recommendation on biodiversity and agriculture rather than other forms of production, etc. So given that, we see this text as being related to agricultural systems so that we can analyse the implications of these inclusions. We'd need a bit more time. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, we're talking about agrobiodiversity after all. So I put for approval paragraph 5 with 3 sets of brackets. One set round and other managed ecosystems, then second square brackets around and other sectors identified by previous COP decisions, and then thirdly, a third set of square brackets around after relevant policies right until the end. I don't see any objections to that. So paragraph 5 has been adopted as amended. And now I'd invite you to approve paragraph 6, starting with invites.
I see no request from the floor. Paragraph 6, Indonesia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. On para 6, Indonesia would like to add farmer, women, and youth in bracket after the word indigenous peoples and local communities. Our rationale is farmer, women, and youth are important actors in the activity to promote awareness and raising activities, Chair. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much. We can add local communities, farmers, women, and youth with no brackets.
Indeed, Chair. Thank you very much. Oh, thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, so I submit for approval paragraph 6 as amended. I see no request. Paragraph 6 approved. Colombia, tiene la palabra.
You have the floor now, Colombia. Thanks, Chair. Sorry for coming in a bit late. We had a problem with the connection now in paragraph 6 at the end. We'd like to make an addition that we mentioned in the plenary. as follows.
Action, comma, including through North-South technology transfer and capacity building. Repito.
Repeat.
Including through North-South technology transfer and capacity building. Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much for that.
Through North-South?
Yes. Technology transfer
and capacity building. I reopen paragraph 6. That was already approved. I don't want to set a precedent. Can we include the suggestion from Colombia? I see Belgium.
Disculpa, señor presidente. Fue un error.
Sorry, Chair. There was a problem with my connection. That's why I wasn't able to raise my hand. Very sorry about that.
Followed by UK.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. On this paragraph and the last addition, we would prefer not to have this in this specific paragraph. It narrows down the focus, so we would prefer not to have this in. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So you're requesting to put brackets on Colombia's suggestion?
Yes, thank you.
Costa Rica?
Costa Rica, please. Thank you, Chair. We would like to support what's just been said by Indonesia about adding women and youth. However, we do not agree with adding farmers. We would prefer to not refer to farmers because it's already included in local communities according to our view. So, okay, we would put farmers in square brackets. That's what you're asking for, Costa Rica, basically, isn't it? UK now.
Hello. Thank you, Chair. Just to follow up on the intervention made by Belgium regarding the text from Colombia, I think we would also find this text a bit out of place in this paragraph. It seems to us to be more about research and related activities. And of course, capacity building and technology transfer is important, but maybe this isn't the right paragraph for it. So we would agree with Belgium and suggest retaining in brackets. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So I submit for approval again, paragraph 6, with brackets around the word farmers and with brackets on the insertion from Colombia. I see no objections. Then for second time, paragraph 6 is approved. Now I submit for approval paragraph 7. I see no request from the UK followed by Belgium. UK.
Thank you, Chair. We wanted to raise the text that is at the end of this paragraph, which refers to involving ministries of agriculture and environment at the national level. It seems to us a strange way to refer to countries or parties, and maybe it is, and of course not all parties will necessarily have ministries of agriculture or environment. They may be structured in many different ways. We'd suggest replacing that by just referring to involving parties as appropriate. And that way it's up to parties which ministries or agencies they choose to engage with the plan. Is that clear, Chair?
Yeah, thank you very much, UK. So you suggest to put involving parties
as appropriate.
As appropriate, replacing ministries of agriculture and environment.
See.
Thank you. That's more simple. I hope it's acceptable to parties. Now we have Chile, followed by Belgium and Peru. Chile tiene la palabra.
Chile, you have the floor. Can you hear me now? Yes, please go ahead, Chile. Perfect. We agree with what the UK has just proposed because we thought of adding agencies that are competent at national level, but I think it's better what the UK has said. It's better, for example, to talk about agencies who are competent on this matter. Well, could you accept the UK proposal involving parties as appropriate without starting to add things and keeping it simple? Yes, okay, we'll do that. So Peru and then Belgium, and then let's try and approve this paragraph. We've got 13 minutes left. Thank you very much, Chair. For us, it's extremely important to have this coordination and link between the two ministries. But we do understand that in other countries that don't have a so-called Ministry of Agriculture and Environment could be a problem, but this does need to be made specific because we've made a great deal of progress in the agricultural sector, and we need to try and define in some way the links and the cooperation between these two sectors. So it's not just other sectors that can be managed in this, but I think that we specifically have to refer to these two sectors. It's very important to talk about the link between these two. Otherwise, this could be put in square brackets. So the UK's proposal is that involving parties as appropriate. And that would replace Ministries of Agriculture and Environment at the national level. And of course, there could be lots of others. So I don't really understand what you would like to do with the wording. Can you accept this amendment? Then that would be open and it'd be ready. Well, given the progress that's been made, we consider that we need to specify the agricultural sector and the environmental sector and coordination between them. Well, perhaps we could say involving parties as appropriate. And then say especially or in particular such and such. So in particular, Ministries of Agriculture and Environment at the national level. Yes, please, said Peru a minute ago. Or else involving parties, including ministries of agriculture and environment at the national level as appropriate. Perhaps that could be a compromise wording so that we don't have square brackets. Otherwise, we have to put the specific part in brackets about the Ministries of Agriculture and Environment. We want to keep it a bit open. Sorry, Chair, for coming back. This has been very useful when it comes for the pollinators plan. It's been extremely important. So that's why it's so important for us. Thank you, Peru. We now have 11 minutes before we have to adjourn. So I do hope that we can at least finish with the operative paragraphs. Belgium, you have the floor.
Belgium, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On this paragraph, we feel when we talk about the new edition regarding the framework of global soil partnership, we limit the scope within where the FAO could act. And so we would prefer, before mentioning it, replacing within by including through. So it would really invite the FAO of the United Nations, including through the framework of global soil partnership, and then it would go on. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so far the paragraph 7 would read invites FAO, including to the framework of the Global Soil Partnership to facilitate implementation of the plan of action involving parties, including Ministries of Agriculture and Environment at the national level as appropriate. That will be the reading of this paragraph. I submit it for approval. I see no objection. Paragraph 7 is approved. Now I submit for approval paragraph 8, invites the UNEP. I see no comments on paragraph 8. Paragraph 8 approved. Now I submit for approval paragraph 9, invites developed countries, parties, Canada, followed by Chile.
Thank you, Mr. President. Canada suggests the deletion of developed country so that the paragraph reads invites parties other governments, irrelevant organizations, and so on. We also suggest the deletion of a consistent with Article 20 of the Convention at the end of the paragraph. Thank you.
Thank you, Canada. Chile, tiene la palabra.
Julie, you have the floor now. Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me? Yes, please go ahead. So in paragraph 9, we'd like to add, after provide technical support, also and financial. So in English, provide technical and financial support. Technical and financial support. Thank you very much, Chile. And we would also like to keep in the part that says consistent with Article 20 of the Convention. Thank you, Chile. UK and then Switzerland.
Thank you, Chair. Just to raise the issue that my colleague raised earlier with the CRP about IPBES, we think the wording should begin with this paragraph using more standard language, and that more standard language would read, urges parties and invites other governments and organizations in a position to do so to provide technical and or financial support, comma, as appropriate, comma, to enable developing country parties and so on, with the rest of the text. So it was just a suggestion to keep consistent language there, Chair, with other decisions. Thank you.
Okay, this is at the beginning, and
yes.
to use our language to have consistency. Thank you, UK. I have Switzerland.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I can be brief. Switzerland supports the UK in their comments, and we also support Canada because we think it's not required to refer to Article 20 at the end of this paragraph. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So we have the usual language at the beginning. We are not considering deleting developed countries. We include financial support as appropriate. And there's brackets on consistent with Article 20. Argentina.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. We can support the UK's proposal to change it into urges parties, or rather urges and then invites parties. And we think we should eliminate in a position to do so because that does not line up with the language of the CBD. But it lines up with the Paris Agreement and the Climate Convention. We agree with Chile adding in financial support, and we also agree with Chile that we need to maintain the part at the end that says consistent with Article 20 of the Convention as we're talking about how resources are going to be provided, and that has to be in line with what is stipulated in the Convention. So are you in agreement with getting rid of developed country? Yes, as long as we keep in consistent with Article 20 of the Convention, and we don't keep in both references. Thank you.
Urge parties and invites developed countries, other governments and relevant organizations to provide technical and financial support as appropriate to enable developing countries parties and so on. But then it's a request to delete consistent with Article 20. And as Argentina mentioned, they want to keep this part, so we need to retain in brackets as well developed countries. So I submit for approval with all these brackets. Paragraph 9 that would read, urge parties and invites developed countries parties in brackets to include financial support as appropriate, and to keep the last part consistent with Article 20 in brackets to save time. I submit this for approval. I see the UK, and we have just 4 minutes to finish, colleagues. UK.
Thank you, Chair. Our preference would be to retain language in a position to do so. I think we can live with the reference to Article 20 of the Convention, but it is our understanding that that language is consistent with language used in other decisions. Our preference is to retain it. Thank you, Chair.
So if we keep in the position to do so, and then you can accept without brackets the reference of consistency with Article 20.
Yes, Chair, I think we could accept that.
Yes, that can release in our brackets. If we can include this expression for in the position to do so. So we urge parties and invite developed countries, other governments, and relevant organizations to provide technical and financial support as appropriate to enable developing countries' parties and with economic transition to promote and so on, consistent with Article 20. If that is the case, we can approve this paragraph without brackets. Is there any opposition? I see Switzerland. I hope you do not oppose.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Yes, we have the same position as the UK. We have to keep parties in a position to do so. This is my mandate, so we have to keep this. Thank you very much.
So, seems we reach an agreement. Urges parties and invite developed countries, other governments and relevant organizations in a position to do so, to provide technical and financial support as appropriate, and it continues the rest of the paragraph without brackets and mentioning consistency with Article 20. If this is the case, I see no objection. So, paragraph Argentina.
Entendimiento es que.
Well, my understanding is there was agreement in lifting square brackets around consistent with Article 20 of the Convention. Yes, that is correct. We would keep in the text that says consistent with Article 20 of the Convention. Well, I'd like to be able to agree to that, but I need to have additional instructions so that I can accept in a position to do so. So for the moment, I would request that we put square brackets around in a position to do so.
Because this is a condition for the second part, we keep both paragraphs in both parts in brackets, in a position to do so in brackets, and also the reference to Article 20. Meanwhile, we need to approve this paragraph as it is then with the two brackets. So paragraph 9 is approved. Switzerland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and sorry to take the floor again. Our understanding is that there now you have lifted the brackets around developed countries. Our understanding is that it should say invites or urges parties in a position to do so. If the developed countries are mentioned, they should be in brackets, just to be sure that this is the version that is currently proposed for adoption. Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification, Switzerland. So you're right. I was trying to reconcile to keep both urge parties and invites developed countries in a position to do so. But if it's not feasible, it just says urge parties and other governments in a position to do so in brackets, and then to continue, and then brackets at the end of the paragraph. So I submit with these amendments this paragraph for adoption with these two brackets. I see no objections. Then paragraph 9 is approved. We are over time, and I'm not sure if we have additional minutes. 2 minutes, no extra time, unfortunately. So we need to stop here our deliberations on this document. We will continue tomorrow, but in order to continue with the first reading of agenda item 9 on health, we will start with the first reading I invite you to be very brief in your interventions on this new document. Of course, it will not be able to produce any CRP, but we complete with this part, and then we will continue with our agenda. We are very delayed to finish with agriculture, to start with synthetic biology, and then originally we plan to continue with risk assessment. So we're way behind our schedule. So I invite you to be very brief tomorrow, and I thank you, all of you, for your collaboration, and see you tomorrow at the same time, at the same channel, with our next chapter. Thank you very much and have a nice day. This session of today is adjourned.